Quest Mage is a powerful archetype that was introduced in the newest expansion. The idea behind the deck is that you want to play down the Forbidden Sequence, and then you want to be using a bunch of Discover cards to be able to then get your quest ready. And once you get the quest done, it's a three mana weapon that ends up being able to be used 7 times, and you're trying then to be using your Discover cards to the most effective use. It's important that when you do press the Discover card, especially when it is through the with the weapon, that you think about the potential worst case scenarios that could come from it as well. Because the simple fact is, like, if you do end up using say Yogg in the Box or something along those lines, it could end up getting a Kassar, which would then obviously mean that you won't be able to do much because you'll have all of your cards shuffled into your deck. So you do need to think about the cards that end up getting played through it to make sure that you're thinking about your worst possible outcome that could come through the Discover effect that you may not have any control over. The cards that you're looking to mulligan for in this deck, you're obviously looking to keep the Secret, you're looking to keep Primordial Glyph, you're looking to keep things like Tide Pools, you're looking to keep the Manufacturing Error. The other cards that are a bit cards that you do consider in terms of matchups, Malfunction obviously for aggressive matchups, Shield Battery obviously for aggressive matchups, the Storage Scuffle, if you're in an aggressive matchup it can be quite useful to clear things, the Chalice obviously once again to help with clearing things. So the deck does have a lot of ability to be able to go against the aggressive matchups, but you do obviously need to consider your potential plays that you have coming from it. The deck does have a lot of RNG, like there's a lot of randomness involved with it, but it does obviously have a lot of mana and power that comes through the effects of the Discover mechanic. So going into this game, I am playing against a Quest Warlock. I currently have the quest going relatively decent. I'm looking at just playing down the Flame Elemental here. I do play it down just to get rid of the 2-3. It's a potential play that I wasn't really sure if I really wanted to do, simply because of the fact that I ended up giving away my spell damage buff, and in general the spell damage buff is relatively strong. But something else that I was considering with that as well is the fact that if I end up drawing heaps of cards, I don't really want to have that just sitting in my hand. And it's one of those things where you do need to just look back and think about the board situation that you have. They end up playing the mass production, so they are getting quite close in terms of their quest. I do obviously have the ice barrier on myself, which is quite strong. It's making sure that if I do take any extra damage, I have a little bit of extra leeway for that. I drew onto the Spot the Difference here, which is obviously quite useful because of the fact that it will end up getting me through the quest. I ended up choosing here the Bookkeeper just because I wanted a few extra spells to be able to play. I chose the Shafar in the second one. The Snake wouldn't have been a terrible choice as well, if because you would have obviously been thinking about your potential damage that you could be coming through that. The other thing now is that I use the Malfunction to obviously clear their board that's here. They do have the 2 of the locations available at the moment, so they're going to be able to obviously send a little bit of damage. And having these minions on the board does mean that I can protect myself a little bit against that. They play down the Cursed Catacombs, so it is going to get them some temporary cards, which will obviously be quite useful for them. And they end up getting the mass production, and then I think they'll also probably get another card that will be ready to go, so they will be able to get the quest online. They end up using the Health Stone, so it does obviously get that quest online for them. And then they play down the Rift, and with the Rift I found with this game is that they were able to get quite a lot of times that they were getting the charge minions, so it was quite concerning, especially with how much damage they were pushing. Luckily, with the amount of ice barriers and things that I had, I am able to deal with that a little bit. They had the 5-3 here, and I feel like they probably should have traded into my 2-1. Like, in general, it's not a bad, it's not the terrible thing, but trading into the 2-1 would have obviously meant that they still would have gotten mana efficiency through that as well. I used the Chalice here just to trade into the 5-2. I did want to see what the outcome ended up coming from it, so I didn't really want to obviously use too many Chalices or anything like that. I chose the Oasis ally. It doesn't really matter too much at the moment since I don't have any other minions onto the board, and they do have their charge minion here as well, so they're going to obviously be able to use the charge minions to deal some more damage to me. Luckily, with the ice barrier being in that hand, it does mean that I'll be able to protect myself a little bit going into this turn that's here. And they obviously will be thinking about if I had a counter spell as well, so it might stop them from using their Corpsicle, which could obviously deal a bit of damage. They use their Fel, and once again they do get a 5/3 and a 4/4, so I'm keeping at the moment that 3 mana spell to be able to use on their Reborn Taunt minion, and that's obviously what I'm trying to use to help with stalling out a little bit longer. I use the Relic of Kings here. I end up choosing the Sleep Under the Stars. It's obviously the best one, and I chose that one in particular because of the fact that I wanted to be able to control what potential outcomes that could come from it. The other two were quite useless, so being able to use it that turn was quite good for me as well. I end up having the Annoyotron sitting on the board, which is fine. I used the spell to be able to then draw me a few extra cards, and then I just used some mana refreshing just to be able to get some more things being able to be used. I used the Scrooge to be able to take out the 5/3, and these cards are okay, but with the Glyph you are looking to try and get better value coming from it, and unfortunately for me it ends up not really doing too well in terms of what trades and things like that were there. I use the Chalice to be able to clear their board, and I play the Spark for Life here as well. I end up clicking on the hidden objects. Like, that's something that I was a bit unsure about. The Relic of Kings probably would have been a decent play in that as well, obviously getting the extra value coming from it. But yeah, like it's one of those things where it's a bit of a, you know, a mismatch. I think that I probably, in hindsight, would have kept that Relic of Kings just to be able to get the extra value and the extra possible choice of what I want. Drawing into the set your health 240 obviously was the best possible outcome for me, so I really should have been looking at that sort of angle. They end up using their hero power here. I'm down to 6 health, so it is looking like I'm not going to do too well from here. So I obviously use the spell. It gets me reset up as well. I use the Yogg in the Box just to get it played down. Like, it's one of those things where if they don't have a board, it doesn't really have too much power behind it. It can clear stuff, it can do a little bit of damage, but in general, you're wanting to play it down when they do have a board. I was just trying to apply a little bit of extra pressure against them, so I also use the Secret Discovery. I keep the Ally. I potentially could have gone for the Ice Barrier, but with the Ally, it does mean that I can potentially weave in an extra Water Elemental. That could be possibly quite useful to be dealing extra damage to them. They end up getting another 4/4 and a 5/3, so once again another turn that they're not getting the 3/5 that I'm trying to get the freeze mechanic on. They use their Glacial Shard, and it does end up pushing damage onto their face since they're taking extra damage coming through the explosive runes. They end up getting a secret as well, so it's either going to be Freezing Trap or Ice Trap since it came from the 1/1, and it's obviously a temporary frost spell. They get the Tide Pool down, so assume they're going for another Corpsicle, but with having this extra health that I do have here, it does mean that I'm getting into a relatively decent position. I do obviously still have another Oasis ally as well if I need to be able to deal extra damage. The Tsunami would have been fantastic for them if they had been able to get that just before the previous turn, rather than when they had the other 1/1 get played down. So I end up playing the Oasis ally first here, just because I want to be able to draw the card, and I don't want to waste a lot of mana with the Starfire that I had in my hand. I play down the Elemental as well, just to get it onto the board. Since I can't use the Oasis ally, I obviously don't have any value coming from that. And I didn't use a thing like the Moonfire or the 0 mana spell because I want to be able to push extra damage onto their opponent's face. They end up getting a 4/4 and a 3/5 here, so I do have a little bit of damage that I have in my hand that could be potentially quite useful to deal damage to them. And since they didn't get any more lifesteal, it does mean that I'm sitting quite well in terms of being able to deal the last bit of damage towards them. So at the moment I've got 6 damage in my hand. They end up using their Platysaur. It draws them an extra card, obviously, but there's not really too much that I'm very concerned about here. I end up getting a Glyph here, so I do play that down first. I'm looking for something that can deal damage. I do get the Yogg in the box here as well. Rising Waves is a card that I choose just to hold it because it potentially could be it could be decent for me to be able to clear the stuff that they have there, and I didn't have any trade. Fortunately for me, I did end up drawing into the bird. I feel like with the Rising Waves, it's possible that I should have kept the photon cannon just so I could deal that extra damage just in case. It would have meant that I would have the extra 3 damage, so I would have had 9 damage in my hand, which then would have been, with the Tide Pool, I could have got something else. But yeah, it was one of those choices where it was not too bad either way. Going into this next match, I am playing against a Rogue. Quite often the Rogues are playing the Dragon package. They'll have the 7/7 that makes your next dragon cost 1. Obviously, it has made the deck's a lot weaker since it's now your next dragon rather than every single dragon, but the deck still does have a decent amount of power coming from it, because you can still get your Sarah Fyakk. If they end up playing the 10 mana Drake, the 10 mana 12/7, that can obviously deal a little bit of damage too. I end up playing my secret down first turn. I do have the Primordial Glyph, which is in general going to be your best card to play. And I choose the Solar Flare here just because a lot of these sorts of decks, they do try and get a little bit of extra chip damage onto you by going wide. I do have the Tide Pool here as well, so I end up using that just to be able to get a few more Discovers online. And I choose the Shield Battery here just because it allows you to get extra armor, which the Rogue will try and push as much damage as it can against you, and having that extra bit of armor obviously does go a long way in terms of being able to deal with potential threats or the damage push that they will be going for. I use the Mage spell here and choose the Shield Battery again, so it means that I'll be able to combo it in a future turn if I need to. And I choose the Frostbolt here because it will be able to stop my opponent's weapon if I need to. I use the Solar Flare just to clear their board, and then I end up going for the Combustion just so I can push extra damage if I need to. Ice Barrier would have been okay, but since I do have the Chalice, I have the Shield Batteries, Malfunction, and those sorts of things. That 2 mana spell would obviously be able to deal quite a lot of damage to them. I used the Malfunction here rather than the Chalice. I could have used the Chalice, it would have been able to clear that whole board as well with 4 mana, rather than the Malfunction. But with the Malfunction, since it doesn't seem like they have a very strong board, especially since they still have coin in their hand, I believe, I ended up playing in terms of that rather than using the Chalice. I use the Shield Batteries here just to clear their board. I use the Combustion just to clear their minion, and I just go for the Hero Power since they don't have a weapon currently equipped. They use Dubious Purchase. It allows them to draw some cards. Obviously, at the moment, my hand isn't really doing too much. Their hand doesn't seem like it's doing too much either. So it means that we're both in a relative stalemate, which is fine for me. I end up drawing into the Pocket Dimension here, which will allow me to essentially finish most of the quest. I obviously use it now. It's decent using it when you do have the extra quest things as well, but it's one of those things where you do need to think about what choices you make. In general, my thoughts that I do with this deck is I don't really want to end up with the 8 mana spell that I had just before, because you want to be able to get rid of a lot of your cards, because you will end up, once you've got the weaponed, potentially drawing quite a lot of cards as well. I chose the Glyph there as well, just to be able to get it so I can get extra Discovers coming from the weapon, and it obviously is quite strong in terms of being then able to, if you chose Tsunami, I would have been able to use it this future turn, but it shows that I've also got Yogg in the box and things like that, so it doesn't really matter too much to me if I don't end up playing that and I play something different. They end up playing the Opoo down, so it does have stealth, which is obviously quite useful for them. I use the photon cannon here, and I'm just deciding which is the best sort of card to be able to go for. The photon cannon ends up dealing damage to my face again. The alliance card ends up being Tyrian Forging, so it's a relatively decent card because it will allow me to push extra damage if I need to. I use the chalice here just to trade into their Opoo, and I do have some decent... I have the frostbolt to play onto them as well, which means they won't be able to use their weapon, and I'm obviously pushing a little bit of extra damage coming from it as well. They end up playing down their Observer of Mysteries. It's not too much of a concern for me. Basically, it was a dead turn for them. I play down the Chalice here just to see potentially what sort of quest it could be. And I don't really mind at this point in time if the Chalice is being played. I played down the Tyrian Forging as well, just to be able to get onto the board. Unfortunately, this does mean that with how they end up drawing the Ziliax, it ends up being able to clear into my Tyrian Forging, which is fine. Like, the quest is, the weapon's all good in general, but since I did have the Yogg in the boxes in my hands anyway, in general it does allow you to clear the majority of your opponent's board, and I did get quite good effects coming from it too, so it does mean that I can end up dealing quite a lot of damage going into them as well. I obviously got the Ragnaros hero power, I shuffled the minions into the deck, I dealt some damage, and I used my hero power and my weapon swing to be able to deal more damage. So like, I did get really good hits with that. They end up using their Fyakk, and it hits a char, it hits onto their minion as well. Like, it's... these sorts of cards, like the Yogg effects, they're not really that strong unless your opponent has boards. Like, it's okay, but they are a lot weaker than you'd think when they don't have a board or your opponent doesn't have a board, because there's nothing really for them to target. They end up overdrawing a few cards as well, so it does mean that they're getting to the point where they're not really going to be able to do too much more. And I do have a decent sort of hand here anyway. Like, basically, with the Ragnaros effect and with the weapon, I do have 13 damage available. I use the Yogg in the box because, in general, as I mentioned just before, it does allow you to clear the majority of opponents' boards really easily. The Typhoon does a bit of damage by removing their cards, and it allows my Ragnaros to be able to go face. And then I just use my hero power, use the Protoss minion, and that's the end of the game. Yeah, so obviously the deck does have a lot of randomness to it, but it does have a lot of power. So if you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and bye for now.